But I do have it right that Greg Cody was in yesterday, and he called the University of Miami loss an epic embarrassment. And Mike Ryan flip-flopped over the course of 2 days from we deserve to not be in the playoffs because of the epic embarrassment, because you lose 2 out of 3, you lose to Syracuse, you're a big favorite. Nobody regards Syracuse the way Mike regards Syracuse. And then Mike just goes off the deep end yesterday and becomes a shilling ambassador for all things Canes, bought and paid for, integrity in tatters, because, I'm alleging, no one has said this publicly except a hand at the end of the show yesterday, that Mario Cristobal threatened to twist the nipples of Mike Ryan if he didn't get out there and change his tone on things. And so the University of Miami is nationally getting more than BYU is in terms. BYU is suffering because it's not the program name that Miami is, and because Miami conjures, even now still, a certain thing in the country, even though they haven't mattered in football this way for 20 years. The country at large is having a good argument about Miami versus Alabama, correct? Because Alabama got in just because of the regard for the SEC. The same thing that Mike Ryan has been yelling about, which is, I understand that conference's earned reputation, but it hasn't been that this year. It's just echoes and fumes like that everyone in that conference has been proven to be beatable by any number of conferences.
Yeah, you made the argument that Oklahoma State was right there with FSU and Purdue as the worst P4 program. They went winless in their Big 12. They beat Arkansas, a 6-win team that beat Tennessee. So it was what I was fearing. I did find it really interesting, Dan, that last night I was not on the popular side whatsoever, arguing that Miami should be in the playoff. But I guess that was going up against a combined bid of 3 SEC teams. When the dust settled and people realized Alabama is in ahead of Miami, and they remember, hey, 11 days ago, Alabama lost 24-3 to a bad Oklahoma team. They have one more loss, and you hear the rationale from Ward Manuel, which is, well, games against teams with a better than 500 record, Alabama is much better. Well, that's a convenient thing to cherry pick. First off, these teams are pretty close. A good tiebreaker would be wins and losses, but we're not going to do that. Fine. What about the teams that are at 500, Ward? What's Alabama's record there? And over the night, I'm really surprised that I guess people just really hate Alabama more than they hate Miami, because it feels like the nation's starting to realize, hold up, that Oklahoma loss. Wait, Miami's loss to Syracuse to bring them to 2 losses on the year, we're going to punish that more than we're going to punish Alabama's loss to a really bad Oklahoma team?
I think that Alabama gets the benefit of the doubt because they've proven this season that their ceiling is higher because they've beaten Georgia. And Miami hasn't gotten the chance to play a team like Georgia, and they haven't gotten a chance to beat a team like Georgia. So automatically, Alabama is getting slotted ahead of them because of that. And
Georgia did lose all my respect with that Georgia Tech game, though.
Yeah, but I don't think
Georgia Tech's good, dude. That's what I've been trying to argue.
No, but all I'm saying is that if Georgia Tech can beat Georgia, then you can't make a convincing.
They can't, because they can't score 2 points. That was so frustrating to watch. Brent Key lost all of my respect in that game. Yeah. I'm sorry. That was so pathetic to watch. He didn't know the rules. He put up a 1 in the second overtime. You can't kick an extra point in the second overtime. Learn the rules. My God. Watching
that game at a bar on mute was really confusing, watching Brent Key go through that. But it's actually pretty unfortunate because I was really invested in that ACC-SEC matchup on Friday, and it turns out that could be the reason why Miami is out. Georgia Tech blowing the 14-point lead and all those calls that went Georgia's way there. Because if Georgia loses that game, Alabama's big signature win that everyone says, okay, well, that's their ceiling, they've proven that they can match it, becomes really diluted. And then the loss to Georgia Tech, all of a sudden Miami's got 2 losses, both to ranked teams. I understand the Alabama argument. They showed what their ceiling could be. Unfortunately for Miami, they didn't get an opportunity to. Here's another tiebreaker that I've been told that the CFP usually considers, and that's common opponents. All right, so you have a Miami team that has a better record than Alabama. They both played a USF team. I know September does not exist in the eyes of the SEC, but in September, they both played USF. Who looked better against USF? Clearly, Miami did. So it's unfortunate that we just keep shifting the barometers in which we do this.
But what was the final score of the Alabama-USF game?
No, I understand how they pulled away.
It was like 42-14 or something.
But was it? I know Miami looked much better and the final score was much better.
Well, now we're
against
going down to
USF.
like how much better did they look quarter to quarter to quarter, which I think is different. I also don't think Georgia Tech would be ranked if they beat Georgia because
You don't
they
think so? There were others receiving
at 8
votes.
and 4,
There were
I'm
others
not
receiving
100%.
votes.
I'm just saying I'm not 100% sure. They might sneak in, but
Yeah,
I'm not 100% sure.
Look, I think ultimately I'm trying to rationalize. I know why Miami is out. Miami is out because they blew a 21-point lead to Syracuse. It's a huge bummer for me in that Miami, if I told you before the season, as you alluded to, Dan, you're going to go 10-2, and you're going to lose 2 games to Georgia Tech and Syracuse, which are games that I looked at the schedule. I'm like, yeah, those are tricky spots inside this conference. And you're going to lose those games by a combined 9 points. And you're not going to get into Charlotte, and subsequently you're not going to get into the CFP. And you're going to have a Heisman finalist. You're going to have the top offense in the nation. This season should feel a lot better than it does right now, and that's a huge bummer because Miami pretty much did all the right things except hold on to a big lead.
Stop being a homer,
Mike.
I thought that was pretty calm and rational. I thought I did well. You just were sitting on that one, huh?
I had the sound. I got it.
But as it relates to Miami and Alabama, this is about the Alabama wins, is it not? I mean, they beat Georgia, they beat South Carolina, they beat LSU at a time LSU was ranked in the top 10.
Don't do the LSU trick. Like, that infuriates me. Like, they all get fat on LSU inexplicably being ranked in the mid-teens, and then everybody beats up on LSU and takes credit for it. I guess a big win is huge. Yeah, it's wonderful. They lost to Vanderbilt and they lost to Oklahoma, and they didn't just lose to Oklahoma. They got figured out.
I want to talk about that in a second, but Jessica, you wanted to get in here.
I think, Mike, at the end of the day, there's 2 things you should be angry about. One, obviously, blowing a 21-point lead against Syracuse and then kicking a field goal down 7 at the end of the game. Those are things that you should be mad about. Second, Stanford. Yep. Let me tell you why. Yeah. Because Stanford beat Louisville in the dumbest way possible. I guess you should really be mad at Louisville, but mostly Stanford, because screw them and screw their stupid tree. They beat Louisville in this dumb career-high field goal at the end of the game because Louisville got an unsportsmanlike penalty and put them in field goal range, and then they jumped off sides, and it was so stupid. And they also beat Syracuse inexplicably at the beginning of the season. Stanford is bad, okay? And Stanford is single-handedly the reason that there's not more ACC teams ranked right now. So screw Stanford. Who decided to let Stanford into... Oh, I guess that would be Miami and all the other ACC
all the other schools and SMU.
Damn it!
And it's kind of funny for me to argue, man, this conference is really hard when SMU just strolls into it and goes to the conference championship in its first year.
Almost like that American Athletic Conference was pretty competitive for the last several years.
This guy's just been
no
waiting.
One's thinking about you right now, dude. No one's thinking about you.
I love your transitive property argument. It's my favorite.
Well, I think, look, Mizzou was inexplicably ranked at several points in this season. You give Mizzou's resume to Duke, Duke is still unranked. Duke should have been ranked, but look, these are all based on preseason rankings. Most of these riders are bought and paid for when it comes to their job, depending on the SEC working out. And Miami just ran into that kind of buzzsaw. They had an opportunity there for themselves, up 21-0. They blew it. It's a damn shame because Miami is a really fun team to watch. Best offense in the nation. Only lost 2 games by combined 9 points. You'd think that'd be good enough. Unfortunately, it wasn't. It's a huge bummer, and this season should feel better to me, but it doesn't.
I will tell you again, it's a made-for-television event, and while I would want to watch the best offense in the sport and Cam Ward play one more game, the nation will have its regard for Alabama, and there's a whole generation that doesn't have any understanding that Miami used to be good. An entire generation, 20 years. So Alabama is getting a Lifetime Achievement Award on a made-for-television event because the argument I would make, and Jessica, you tell me if you think I have this wrong, because at the time that Northern Illinois beat Notre Dame, I said to myself, even not knowing anything because it was too early in the season, okay, that's a giant upset. That's probably the biggest upset there's going to be in the sport this year, winning at Notre Dame. It was the most confusing result of the season, but it was so early that I'm like, okay, well, Notre Dame must not be good if that's happening. I still don't have a sample on who everyone is. I've got a sample on Alabama, and the most confusing result to me this season, I didn't see the game. How the hell did Alabama lose that way to Oklahoma? How was the offense neutralized? What don't I know about the importance of Nick Saban's coaching that would make it so that Alabama and that quarterback, that Milroe wouldn't be able to do anything in a game against a terrible Oklahoma team. Where were the most confusing results of the season? Because that one I just didn't understand. And it was so recent that I can't believe they got forgiven for it, even though Alabama's been forgiven for any number of losses over the last few years, just because people know to put them on television.
I mean, I completely agree with you about the Oklahoma game. I think that like we talked about Alabama's ceiling being they can beat Georgia. Their floor is a lot lower than it's been in the last 10 years because that game was really bad. 3 points against Oklahoma at the end of the season is a just horrendous offensive output for Alabama, for any team. But I think that Alabama may not make it, right? Because if Clemson wins, SMU is probably going to get the spot. Clemson's going to get the bye week probably with the ACC championship game. So Alabama may not make it. And I think, and I could be totally wrong about this, but I think that if you explain to an Alabama fan you didn't make it because of the Oklahoma loss, they're probably going to nod their head and be like, you know what? That makes sense. Just like if you told me in September, or, I guess like the better example is like if Notre Dame lost to USC this past weekend, Notre Dame goes into that game knowing they're playing Southern Cal on the road. It's their rival. If they lose, they're not going to make the playoff at 10-2 because they have the Northern Illinois loss. And if you told me that and it happened, I would agree with you. Notre Dame should not make the playoff as a 2-loss team with the Northern Illinois loss. But they went into that game knowing we have to win and we're in because this will be an 11-1 season. There's not enough 11-win teams to overcome that. And so this is a win and you're in situation. It's the same thing for Miami playing at Syracuse. Miami knew they had to win that conference game to make the ACC championship game. It was a play-in game for the playoff, and Miami had the lead. They had a chance to tie it late in the game, and they couldn't finish it. And that's, I think, the difference between 11-1, 10-2, and 9-3 right there.
Yeah, but I also think is that people were watching the end of that game, and people must not have been watching what happened in Oklahoma, Alabama, because you can't know what happened in that game and say to me that that's a team that deserves to be among the 12 best.
Yeah, but you can watch them play against Georgia and Tennessee and LSU and say that team could win the national championship.
They move the goalposts because it's convenient when September doesn't matter. And part of the argument that Lucy was making on behalf of the SEC, I think she was arguing more for South Carolina. I think we all know that South Carolina's out because they lost to Alabama, and that confuses the process. Because head-to-head has to matter. Alabama beat Georgia in September. What they did recently was put up 3 points against one of the worst Oklahoma teams of our lifetime. That happened 11 days ago. And
they also beat Mercer.
So they climb up 3 spots because they beat Mercer, and they beat an Auburn team by 2 scores, I guess. It's a bummer. It's a huge bummer, but we knew that if it got into a situation where you're parsing the difference between Alabama and Miami, Alabama's going to win that tiebreaker because of all the SEC stuff. And it's a damn shame because Miami had it there for them. All they had to do was hold on to that lead. And ultimately, that is probably going to haunt me for years. Because that quarterback was a unicorn. This offense was one of the greatest offenses we've ever seen in the history of college football. Not Miami football. That's a certainty. Not the best in the nation. That's a certainty. One of the best of all time. It's a huge bummer that we don't get to see Cam Ward play again.
It should haunt you for years, and it should haunt Mario Cristobal for years, because they blew it, Miami, right? Like I want to have righteous indignation on behalf of Miami. They should be ranked ahead of Alabama, and you can make a good argument that their only 2 losses were by 9 points to good teams. That's true, but the timing of those losses was disastrous, an absolute disaster. When they blew that 21-point lead, they had no chance. There's no room. I want to have righteous indignation on behalf of Miami. It's very, very difficult the way that season ended.